Hey y'all, this is Will, otherwise Zelray, and today in Once Human we're going to be going over the Wildfire, a support weapon. Yes, you heard me, a support weapon in Once Human that does great damage as well. Let's jump right into it. Okay, now that that intro is out of the way, let's get into actually talking about this gun, what it does, what it's about, all that good stuff. Let's go to our blueprints. Wildfire, the first thing on the list. This cost 2,000 Starchrome from the Wish Machine. I decided to try this out after I saw someone else messing with it, and I wanted to see what all the hype was about. So, going over this weapon, it has a 60% chance to trigger the bullseye when hitting a target. There's an 80% chance to spread the bullseye to one enemy within a 15-meter area. If there are no enemies within the area, weapon damage plus 25% for 10 seconds. Then finally, when hitting a weak spot of marked enemies, attack plus 3% for 10 seconds up to 3 stacks. So when you're fighting a boss, you're doing a whopping 34% additional damage beyond all your other benefits and boons to your character. And not only that, one of the biggest things about this gun is when you're fighting, say, an elite in a room, you can focus target that, and every other enemy in the entire room will be highlighted and marked for your entire team to attack as well. This is a team build. This is bringing out roughly 16% extra damage to all your teammates when you're playing in a group, minimally. This is a pretty cool thing to have on your side. Going over how we're actually building this weapon, let's go to gear. I am using a vulnerability amplifier. This adds an additional 8% vulnerability on top of the 8% that is intrinsic within the bullseye itself. Now, this could be better. Typically, when I'm looking at any mod, I look at the attribute effects, and I want two main things for a weapon damage build. I want weapon damage itself, and then either weak spot or critical damage, depending on what works well with the weapon or what I can balance out. Currently, I have no weapon damage on this, so that is reducing my damage overall on this gun. I want to make sure that you understand that within the attributes. Stacking 2 damage attributes on top of each other is definitely the way to go, just to boost your raw damage ability. Going over accessories, we have the muzzle, which is the light break. This is 100% what you get on this gun. You cannot change that out. And then we have, for optics, the compact reflex sight. This drops out of the Morphic chest shop. That's from Severin in any town. Very easy to get. We have the tactical, for the tactics, the integrated laser sight, which I'll show you where to get that in a second. For the magazine, we have the extended pistol mag. What this does is gives us great accuracy, very good accuracy. And I want to do a little bit demo talking about ammunitions. A lot of people don't understand that you can make legendary ammunitions. And this not only increases my attack by 3 seconds when I attack something that has the bullseye, but it's also doing an additional 15% raw damage per shot. This means over your standard tungsten, that's only doing 10% extra damage per shot, this is going to give you about a 10 to 15% advantage over anyone else. In that starting video, I was definitely using that because I wanted to show off a big number, and I want to go over that as well, just so you understand how big numbers work and how they might not always be representative of the gun that you're actually trying to use. Excuse me. So let's go over to the map real quick. And let's go up to Blackfell, which is going to be right there. From Blackfell, almost due east is the integrated laser sight. This is going to be in a rock that you need to explode with an explosive of some sort. Very easy to obtain. It's right in this little oil field area. And then your extended pistol mag is going to be dropping out of a strange door monolith. You know, the doors, they had to enter the right one. You go through the right one from the puzzle. This will drop out of that. It's above Blackfell, almost directly north, so it's very easy to get to. And now that we went over the weapon itself, let's talk about some of the gear I'm using and things you can change up as well. So I have the recurve crossbow on because this is a bullseye build, and it does increase my critical rate by 30%, which is pretty huge. Not only that, that pairs with the mask mod that I'm using. Almost everyone tries to use this mask mod when they do big numbers. I disagree with that sentiment, but I'll get to that in a moment. The long axe is for specific situations where you have a setup time. The long axe gives you Fortress Warfare, which also increases your entire damage loadout, so you can use that when possible along with the recurve crossbow if you really need to get out big numbers. In the intro video I was not doing this. I do not find the long axe practical for a lot of bosses and a lot of fights, but sometimes you get a downtime where it can be useful. So for weapons, that's what I'm running, just to accentuate the damage of the Wildfire. Going on to armor and just general setup. I think 2-piece Bastille will be the best for this. These are found items on my Bastille, so unfortunately this is going to die in a little bit, but I got all my testing done with it. The reload speed is amazing for the Wildfire, and then the HP above 70% equals 10% additional weapon damage is also a really, really strong buff. It absolutely is. I believe you can build Wildfire in 2 different ways, a critical build like I am doing, and then also a weak spot build. So for my critical build, I'm using Falcon, and for 2 reasons. Falcon and Lone Wolf are essentially the same thing, but done in different ways. I don't have the proper pieces for Lone Wolf, so what I'm trying to do here is get Falcon as a setup and a general layaway until I get the Lone Wolf. The differences in general, though, just to give you an idea, we have 32% crit damage all the time with Falcon, plus 5% critical rate. And then when you go over to your Lone Wolf, which is going to be right here, you get extra magazine capacity, which I think would be outstanding for this pistol. You got extra crit rate, 5%, just the same. And instead of 32% increased critical damage, you are getting a total of 36 with the 3-piece. However, it needs to ramp up to 36. So when you're looking at raw critical damage over time, you're most likely going to see that Lone Wolf beats out Falcon just by 1 or 2% on average, but the extra magazine capacity is a much better stat than you would have with the stamina when rolling on the first perk of the Falcon. Just to go over that, very simple. However, the Falcon is a definite budget gear, and you should be using it until you really feel confident that this is the build you want to choose. Going over the final piece and the unique effect of this build, when hitting marked enemies, damage plus 30%. Now, this is going to give you the most damage 100% of the time, and you could be looking at some of the other things you can do with marked in general and the bullseye. You can automatically reload 1 ammo 40% of the time and recover 1% of lost HP. So this is definitely going to be your like sustain and damage over time build instead of like burst damage. Then also you're going to have, after triggering the bullseye, the next 1 bullet will count as a weak spot hit even if they do not hit a weak spot. So weak spot damage plus 30% to damage or to enemies affected by the bullseye. So this is also a really good damage weapon type build with the leather boots. However, I find that just the simple boots that we're using, the earthly boots, they're boots on the ground, same name. It's just 2 different spots with 2 different names. I'm not really sure why. You just get a straight 30% damage boost. I think this is the most steady damage increase you can do, and almost in any situation you can't go wrong with the earthly boots, aka boots on the ground. Okay, now that that's out of the way, let's take a look at the mods that we have as well for this. Starting again with the Wildfire, we did go over this. I'm just going to touch. The bullseye adds vulnerability plus 8%, a vulnerability amplifier. It's just strong, it's good. We're going now to the hat. I am using Precise Strike, which is 36% extra weak spot damage after hitting 3 times, essentially, as long as you can hit your weak spots. I think this is great. Now you can see here I have a ton of crit damage and a lot of weapon damage on this, and also reload speed, which was a nice bonus effect. Having weapon damage, critical, or weak spot damage, 2 out of the 3 of those as attribute effects is going to ramp up your damage on any build. Not just this build, but any weapon damage build. Those 2 things are going to be great. Going over to the mask, we have targeted strike. When hitting marked enemies, crit rate plus 10% and critical damage plus 25%. This also has a little bit of extra crit damage and weapon damage on it. I'm looking potentially for a better item before I 5 out of 5 this and get my damage ramped up. Targeted strike also is something that almost every build uses when they want to do big numbers. The whole bow plus, or crossbow rather, plus targeted strike is an interesting concept when you want to burst your numbers and make it look real big, but over time I find that actually using a mask mod that is for your build is going to end up better than not. Now there are certain cases, such as Frost Vortex, where you don't really have a perfect, amazing mask mod, so this might be a better idea for the Frost Vortex. However, I would only run it when I have a friend playing a build like the one I am playing, because then it's going to be a 100% uptime and just make more sense. On to the jacket. Jacket, you can almost use anything you want, but making sure that you have the proper attributes is going to be very important. One thing that I will mention is quick comeback. When using a healing shot, movement speed plus 20% for 2 seconds and refill the magazine from the inventory up to 100% is an amazing chest mod. And if you can get one of these with proper stats, this is probably what you want to use. The ability to heal and reload at the same time saves you so much time. Those are usually exclusive from each other, so you have to reload then heal or heal then reload. It wastes a lot of time. Getting quick comeback, I think, is probably going to be the best in slot for most people's chest builds, unless you're in a PvP server where something like Headguard or head-on conflicts, something like that might be a better choice. But for PvE, quick comeback, 100% hands down the best chest mod that you can get. Going to the pants, I run Deadshot. Simple. Just extra critical damage over every time you critical. This is a huge number. 45% is nothing to scoff at. And this is additive with your weak spot damage. It does a whole bunch for you. Going to the gloves, I run Crit Amplifier. You can also do Crit Boost depending on the actual stats you get on your attributes. For myself, I find that this is almost a best in slot roll, so I'm going to keep it. Now, when you get crit rate plus 15%, that allows you to maybe even drop off of the Falcon set into something else for your critical, and that can be very helpful as well. There is a weak spot build for this, and I feel like there almost is a pure damage with a little bit of weak spot and crit built into it. So I'll go over to those in a second. Boots on the ground, aka the earthly boots, I'm running the slow and steady. I find that this is the most consistent damage upgrade you can get. Flat, no matter what, you get 10% damage, and if you're healthy above 90% of your total HP, you gain an additional 10 for 20% overall weapon damage. It's just good status damage as well if you're running a mixed build. I see a lot of people using either covered advance for the 30-second buff. However, I don't feel this is very practical. You're always getting a random bullet hitting you unless you're hiding in a corner, so I feel like this can drop off too easily. I really feel slow and steady is the best standard steady damage you can get. That's all the mods. What I will say on this is there's a lot of ways to build this. I think 2-piece Bastille, as I said, is 100% the way to go. Let's go over a weak spot build with that real quick. You would just subtract your Falcon set for Lone Wolf, excuse me, for, where are we here? A Renegade. A 3-piece Renegade to get extra weak spot damage. You get the reload speed in there, and you also get the Archer's Focus for the extra weak spot damage. I think there's also a build hiding where you use 1-piece Renegade for the reload speed, but then you're using 2-piece Savior for the extra 10% weapon damage. This could also be a way that you could play this back and forth. So there's a lot of different armor builds, so don't feel like you're locked into one or another. I think that's very important to understand. And that goes over pretty much everything that we have going there. So simple damage check. When you're just shooting into the dummy, you do a good amount of damage. Now, it isn't those 60 and 70,000 crits that I'm doing on the boss, but Treant is exceptionally weak to weak spot hits. And I think it's important to realize that. But you're running around 35,000 DPS on average with good ammo. You can bring that down a little bit further because most people will be using tungsten ammo rather than the smart AP ammo, but for special circumstances, you can do that. Now, in a perfect scenario where you have everything up and going and ramped up, this damage number can get a lot higher. Say if you have your deviant out, you have your crossbow ready to go, you get a good weak spot hit, and then you start in, you can ramp this number up a lot higher, and you can see big numbers starting to come. As I said, Treant takes a lot of weak spot damage, and this number is getting doubled almost. So don't pay attention to every number you see, because they could be lying to you in average circumstances. This gun hits hard, and it's easy to use as long as you're good at aiming at weak spots. It will definitely treat you well. Not only that, but it will treat all your friends well as well. Excuse me for that. But being able to increase everyone's damage by an additional 16%, them having the option now to use their own targeted strike if they want to, which means that they get extra crit rate, crit damage. And then also there's one other benefit. When you go to your backpack and into your food items, you can get mixed fried hot dog. This is, I can't remember exactly where I picked up. I'm sure it's on a map somewhere. But this, for me, since I'm using Falcon, I use rabbit meat for the increased stamina. But you have enhanced marking. Use to increase damage by 20% towards any enemy affected by the bullseye. So if you have a buddy or you yourself are running this build, you get 20% extra damage, which is pretty huge. Not only that, but if your friends don't have a good food item, I'm looking at a lot of elemental builds right now, you can run the mixed fried hot dog to increase your damage by an additional 20% with your whimsical drink for an extra 25% status damage, and be hitting super hard on almost any target you want to. And that is the Wildfire. Hopefully I covered everything for you, and if you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching. Later.